What do we have here? Yes, it's me, your boy, Jules Gill for Live and Let's Dice, and I have just found something very disturbing in my slot. Don't read too much into that. It's the Seraphon battletome, baby! Do you like your lizards traveled to you by star dimension? Then this is the battletome for you. Thank you very much, Games Workshop, for sending me over an advanced copy of this, because to you, today, my lovely people, I'm going to go through some of the battle traits, the new changes to the battletome, the points changes, some tactical options, and of course the new scenery piece that was announced. So without further ado, let's see what's inside this scaly book, shall we? Lizard Men, actually the first army that I actually ever collected in Warhammer Fantasy back in the day. You remember the ones that came against the Draconians? That was a good box set. As with every major release, everyone's always going on about, oh, what's the new models? What's the changes? What are the, give me the new stuff. And it's a little bit of a damp skink, as it were, because of the fact that you're only getting one new piece out of this. There's no endless spells. I'll explain why in a minute. There's no new models that are joining this, but you do get the rather amazing terrain piece, which let's just dive straight in there and have a look. Boom, there it be, the Realm Shaper engine. Look at that. You're getting some serious Necron vibes off of it, I hear you say. Yes, of course you are, because this thing, well, butter my lips. So let's talk about this Realm Shaper engine. What is it? It's a scenery piece, so it doesn't cost anything. You and your opponent have to agree to put it down, which is so far not ever been a problem, but I have heard some people just being like, nah, do one. It's a garrison and an offensive piece for your army. So what the garrison does is that it means that you can put models with up to 20 wounds or less inside of it as a total. It doesn't mean that you can put in like, I don't know, like 20 stegodons or whatever. Preclude all of the models in a unit from garrisoning the Realm Shaper engine, then the unit cannot garrison the Realm Shaper engines. Therefore, you can't put like 20 of a 30 Soros Warrior squad inside, then have the 10 elsewhere. But do you not see how immediately devastating this could be? If you and your opponent are agreeing to bring scenery to the table and they say, right, you can plop that wherever, you've effectively just got a first turn deep striking unit, and because of the fact it says it's a combined wound characteristic of 20, that means that you could put in, say, 10 Soros Warriors for a buff or some skinks, and then put in some heavy hitting arcane users in there as well. That would be delicious. But let's talk about the scenery rules. Power Unleashed. In your hero phase, if this model was garrisoned by a friendly Seraphon wizard or friendly Seraphon priest, you can pick one terrain feature anywhere on the battlefield and roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of that terrain feature. Add 2 to the roll if the terrain feature is within 18 inches of this model, and subtract 2 from the roll if that terrain feature is more than 36 inches away from this model. On a 4 up, the unit suffers D3 wounds. Now here's the thing, this scenery here counts as a terrain piece itself, meaning that if you plonk it right down behind enemy lines and then just say that's where its power is going to be unleashed, you've not only got a garrison there stopping people from getting you off it, but it means that you can start annihilating people who come into close contact with it. A brilliant, brilliant piece. I bet you this will see a lot of play. So basically for the one model that they have added, and the reason I didn't include it in this is because it wasn't like a character or something that could benefit your army with points values or have to make things. This is a must-have. It costs 0 points. Buy it. Take it wherever. It's free mortal wounds. Why would you not want to take it? You're building an army and you're thinking to yourself, okay, what makes the Seraphon so great? Well, despite being massive, scaly lizards with like huge clomping jaws and brute strength, they've of course got their allegiance abilities and their battle traits. So let's talk about this. When you build an army, you now have to decide whether or not you're going to have them as starborn or coalesced. Now this gives them 2 different battle traits, but they do all have some generic ones as well. The generic ones that they've got are Contemplation of the Ancient Ones. At the end of your hero phase, you can pick one friendly Slan and replace the spell that they know from the Law of Celestial Domination table with a new one as well. So basically, if you get bored of the spell that you've got assigned to your character, or you want to switch it up to match what the enemy is doing, you can do that every single hero phase. Nice. Now, they've also got this thing called the sacred asterisms. And at the start of your hero phase, you can pick one of the following asterisms to be in the ascendant until your next hero phase. Basically, you're choosing a power every single battle round. And you've got the Great Drake to choose from, which is in the combat phase, pick one friendly Seraphon hero. Until the end of that phase, you can add one to the hero's attacks of the melee weapons used by that hero. So basically, give it a little extra buff to some boys if they need to clump up some meat. Then you've got the Hunter's Steed, which is add one to the run rolls and charge rolls for friendly Seraphon units, which is great if you want to close the distance straight away. And finally, you've got the Sage's Staff, which is you can pick one friendly Seraphon wizard and you can add one to the casting or dispelling rolls for that wizard if it is your hero phase, and you can add one to the unbinding rolls for the wizard if it's the enemy hero phase. Now those are just the generic traits. That's what every single Seraphon army gets. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because now you've got those basic abilities there. You have to choose one of the two words, the Starborn or the Coalesced, to add to your Seraphon army. Now, the Coalesced allows you to choose the Kotal's Claw or Thunder Lizard's keyword, and I'll detail those two specifically a little bit later on. I won't detail all of them because I'm pretty sure that GW will snipe me from afar with an assassin, but let's just say that you've chosen the Coalesced. Now, the Coalesced, they're cold-blooded, which means that they ignore modifiers, positive or negative, to their bravery characteristics. Quite useful when you're fighting stuff like the Nighthaunt or characters or heroes that have huge leadership debuffs to try and make things go away. Very useful. They also have predatory fighters. Add one to the attacks of the Jaws weapon used by the Coalesced units. Every single Seraphon unit seems to have like the biting Jaws ability. They're not super powerful, but in a pinch, having double the attacks on your units, it's going to make a difference at some point, especially against weaker armored things like the Gloomspire Gits and things like that, or Skaven. You just chew straight through them. They also have Primeval Domain. So they also have Primeval Domain. If a territory feature is partially or wholly within the territory of a coalesced army, then any damned, arcane, inspiring, and mystical scenery rules for that terrain feature only apply to the coalesced units, while any deadly and sinister scenery rules for the terrain do not apply to them. So that means that you could effectively use that to your advantage, stick some people within some deadly terrain, and watch your enemy have to come across it to get to you, while you just sit there ignoring all of the negative effects. Very useful if you're trying to play tactically, but it's situational, as I know that there are some people out there who don't actually play with that much deadly terrain, so comme ci, comme ça. They also have Scaly Skin, which is subtract 1 from the damage inflicted by each successful attacks that targets a coalesced unit to a minimum of 1. Now that is a huge game changer. You've upped the durability of each of your units effectively by double if you've got 2 damage attacks coming in. That will put them up there. They've got a 4-up save regardless, so they're not terrible when it comes to their armor. So again, I think that really is going to help protect your heroes, keep your big boys alive as well. I mean, they're going to be tough to take down to begin with, but still, it could be the edge you need to turn the tide of battle. So that's the Coalesced. I'm only going to talk about them because I'm now going to feed into what that allows you to choose as keywords. This is the thing with the new battle tomes. We're seeing it all the way across. Every single faction has new abilities, which mean that you get to choose your basic abilities or your allegiances, and then they'll have like sub-factions, and it allows you to paint up your armies in different styles and have obviously different battle traits as well. So what we're going to be looking at are the Dracothian's Tail and the Fangs of Sotek. Now, the Dracothian's Tail, I'm just going to show you boys and girls. Look at that lovely little picture there. It's very nice. So they are, their entire gimmick is about whipping across the battlefield and using their speed and strategy to get the edge on their opponents. And remember what I was saying before about the Realm Shaper engine as well, being able to garrison up models. This could be a very good bonus to that, because they've got this ability called Appear on Command. Instead of setting up a friendly Dracothian's Tail unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that it will wait to appear at command as a reserve unit. And you can do this for every single unit that's on the table. So if you're putting down 1 on the table, you can keep 1 in reserve. 2 on the table, 2 in reserve, 3 on the table, 3 in reserve, and so on and so forth. There is one sort of catch, which is if they haven't appeared on the table within the or the start of the 4th battle round, they're all slain. That's fine, and they have to be within 18 inches of a friendly slan as well, and more than 9 inches away from enemy models. But that is an incredibly useful ability if, say, you decide to garrison the scenery with a slan model, then bring these guys down straight away afterwards, and you've got the extra wounds from the other units that you've already garrisoned in there. You could start having a backline destroyer straight away in turn 1 or 2. Very useful. They've also got a command trait, which is called the Ancient Knowledge. This is what a general has to have if you choose this sub-faction. And this basically says that the general knows 1 extra spell from the Law of Celestial Domination, and in addition you can re-roll 1 casting, dispelling or unbinding roll for this general each hero phase. It's useful if you're just buffing up the power of those slan that you're hopefully going to be protecting quite a lot. And their artifact of power, which again has to be given to them, is called the God Beast Pendant, and I love this. The first time the bearer is slain, before removing them from the battlefield, roll a dice. On a 1 to 3, the bearer is slain. On a 4, 5 or 6, the bearer is not slain, all wounds allocated to them are healed, and any wounds currently remain to them are negated. It's a 50-50 shot, but that could bring back one of your heroes, and let's not forget that these heroes can be on the backs of bloody carnosaurs. They could be impossible to deal with at the best of times, and then giving them a 50% chance of coming back again with no wounds. I like it. But let's say that that's not your thing. Maybe you fancy a bit of the Fangs of Sotek instead, and I can see why, because in the first battle round, they get to add 3 inches to the move characteristics of their skink units. If you're looking to cap objectives quickly, adding 3 inches onto the move characteristics and then being able to run them in advance or whatever, that's bellissimo. Their command ability, though, is that you can use this command ability at the end of the enemy's charge phase, and if you do so, pick 1 friendly Fangs of Sotek skink unit from the Skinks War Scroll, blah 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 blah, Chameleon Skinks or Hero, blah blah blah, and that allows you to, after all of the units have resolved shooting attacks, roll a dice. On a 4-up, that unit can make a normal move. If it does, it must retreat but cannot run. A unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per phase. Now that is so useful. Skinks are sneaky by nature, so having them go up, shoot all their blow darts, fire their bows, and immediately retreat back to the safety of the Croxagors or the Soros Warriors that are following them up as well, narratively very cool, and also tactfully, that is really, really good, tactically speaking. Being able to go up there, do some damage, and bring the enemy towards you, or make their charges that much more difficult. Their command trait that they've got is called Old and Grizzled. If this general is part of your army and on the battlefield at the start of the hero phase, you roll a dice, and on a 3-up, you receive 1 extra command point. And then obviously your general has to take that, but that is brilliant. Imagine getting an extra command point on top of what you normally get. I'm a huge fan of that. And their artifact of power, which again their hero must take if they are part of this sub-faction, is called the Serpent God Dagger. Pick 1 of the bearer's melee weapons. At the end of any phase, if any wounds inflicted by that weapon in that phase were allocated to an enemy model and not negated, and that model was not slain, you roll a dice, and on a 5-up, it's slain immediately. Again, it's a shot in the dark, but imagine having your hero, a little, say you decide to pop it on a skink stargazer, and then all of a sudden, boof, goodbye Keeper of Secrets, boof, goodbye Bloodthirster, boof, see you later Nurgle, you stink. Now there are another 2 here, but I ain't going to show you that today. Instead, what we're going to do is get a little bit technical for your boy, because what we're going to do now is flip over to a few of the favourites, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit more detail, but also reference their previous points before they got this update. So we're going to start with the big boy himself, Lord Croak. Now Lord Croak in the previous battletome cost 430 points. In this one, he's only 320 points. So let's take a look and see what stat lines have changed between those 2 models. Oh good, my phone is saying that it can't display. A lot of people were saying he was quite overpowered, but he was slow and he didn't have a great save. So let's just see what they've changed on this one as well. He had an ability called the Ancient Spirit Spectral Claws as his attacks, and it was 2d6 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. Now here, he's been changed over and he's got instead the Azurite Force Barrier, because obviously it makes more sense because he's dead, or not dead, he's undying, but he's a mummy, so he needs to have like a barrier protecting him that does damage rather than like attacking with claws and stuff like that. This has a 3 range, it has the attacks which are The attack's characteristics of the force barrier are equal to the number of enemy models within 3 inches of the attacking model, and that's the number of attacks he gets. So it's not going to be as much as 2d6 potentially could be, but if he's got waves upon waves crashing against this amazing barrier, kind of makes sense thematically as well. To hit on 3, to wound on 3, -1 rend, -1 rend, 1 damage. So he's not exactly the combat powerhouse, but he shouldn't be. He's definitely a wizard, because he can, and I quote, cast up to 4 spells in your hero phase and attempt to unbind 4 spells. And he knows Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, Celestial Deliverance, and Comet Calls. Now, Celestial Deliverance can be cast up to 3 times. So we could sit there and just cast the same spell again and again and again and again. Ridiculous. Casting value of 7 the first time, 8 on the second time, the third is a 9. Now each time it's cast, you pick up to 3 different units within 10 inches of the caster, and on a 2-up, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. If it's a Chaos Demon unit, then it's 3 mortal wounds straight away. Mad. And Comet's Call is basically for those that are further away. If you can't be within 10 inches to absolutely give them the finger like that, Comet's Call casting value of 7, and you can pick up to D3 different enemies anywhere on the battlefield, and each of those units suffers D3 mortal wounds. But if the casting roll was 10, you can pick up to D6 different enemy units instead. Sling them at the back and just start doing Comet Call, Comet Call, Call. Let them come to you, because when they do, they're going to get absolutely obliterated. But for 300 odd points, is there anything better? Well, let's take a look, shall we? Take a look. Because the Soros Warriors, which are going to be your backbone of all of the army pretty much, they have stayed put at 90 points per unit of 10. They get a move of 5, 1 wound, 4-up save, 8 bravery. Now, they've got an alpha that can add 1 to the attacks characteristics, pretty standard for everyone. They've got a Star Drake icon banner, which means that you can subtract 1 from the bravery of other units that are there. Got a War Drummer, which means that you can reroll charge units, and you've got the Ordered Cohort. Add 1 to the attacks characteristics of this unit's Celestial Clubs or Celestial Spears while this unit has 15 or more models. Now here's the thing, they hit and wound on, so they hit on 4s or 5s with the powerful jaws, and they wound on 3s and 4s. That's not great. But you've got abilities with the Old Blood, with the leaders that actually, they've got command abilities. I'll just find the Old Blood here, which is, oh, it might be not the Old Blood, it is, yeah, it's the Soros Old Blood, sorry. He has a command ability that if you use, you can pick 1 friendly Soros unit that's within 18 inches of him, and it adds 1 to the hit rolls. So suddenly you've managed to turn what is an average at best hitting ratio into something that's much more viable. So useful. Very useful indeed. And we'll end by talking about the Chameleon Skinks, just because I like them. I really like the Chameleon Skinks, to be honest. Let's have a look and see what they were worth in the previous battletome. In the previous battletome, they were a whopping 110 points. Now they've moved down to 90. Now what they've got is they've got their lovely little dart pipes. They have a range of 16. They can attack twice, hitting on 3s, wounded on 4s, 1 damage, and a Celestite dagger if they get into close range, which is 5s and 5s because they're weak as piss. But here's the fun stuff, because of the fact that you can set them up on the battlefield and put it to one side and say that it's coming in as a reserve unit, and you can bring it in at any of your phases, so you get a nice ambush unit straight away, as long as it's 9 inches away from enemy models, obviously. And you can also say if the unit is on the battlefield, at the end of your movement phase, you can remove it and say that it's hiding. So you can basically bring them on and bring them off again. Bring them on because they're chameleons, they can disappear. How brilliant is that? So as soon as they look like they're getting into trouble, it's like, oh God, the Khorne Berserkers are getting a bit close. Disappear. See you later, lads. Peace out. They've also got Perfect Mimicry, which is the cover modifier adds 3 to their saving throws instead of 1. So you pop them on some terrain holding an objective. Perfect. Really difficult to dislodge. And then even when they do get close, if you don't want to lose them, you just go back out. Just go, see you later, pals. I'm off. And they've got Star Venom, which is basically if they hit with a 6, the attack inflicts 1 mortal wound straight away. So while they might be weak as piss with a regular 6-up save, honestly, they end up being a very useful tactical unit that could save you objectives, could grab them straight away on turn 1, and then fade into nothing as soon as it gets hot in the kitchen. I like that soup, you know what I'm saying. But let's end on a little bit of a weird note. So there's no endless spells. No endless spells that they get 1. But that's because they get every endless spell. And by that I mean that every single endless spell that is not attached to a faction, they can bind cast. A bound version meaning that only players can try and dispel it or unbind it, but they can't take control of it. So no more summoning the purple sun of Shyish only for your opponent if you decide to go, if you win the roll-off or whatever for the next turn, being able to just go like, right, cool, I'll take that then, and just mow over your own troops. That's the one thing that has been a bit of a bane, and why malign sorceries and endless spells, they never really stick in my personal Age of Sigmar groups, because of the fact that you're just like, oh, here's this devastating thing. I'm really close to it. It's going to come back and bite me in the ass, this. Whereas this, you can now just be like, boom, 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 and you can't do nothing about it. And you can have, with the right slan loadout, make it even more difficult for them to dispel it, and you're just causing chaos. The best thing about the Seraphon army is that it perfectly hits that stride between having an army that is really magically focused, able to dish out damage with spells all across the world, or the realm of battle. But they've also got some real heavy hitters as well, the Croxagors, the Stegodons, the Pterodactyls. Then you've got the fast attack ones as well, like the Pterodons, that's what I actually meant, and you've got the Skinks that can get there. So you've got an army that is as balanced as you want to make it. If you want to run some old bloods and basically just have a big old smash fest, then that is perfectly viable. If you want to hang back and just have it all completely fielded with cheap Skinks and heavy hitting heroes that are magic users, you can do that as well. And with that scenery piece, being able to plop some stuff straight away onto objectives or harass the enemy, you are laughing. I love to see that there's an army with so much potential coming out. I realise that the Disciples of Tzeentch and Slaanesh have already had their nerfs and stuff come in. I hope that these guys don't need it, but only time will tell how it plays out on the battlefield. But that's been my first impressions of the Seraphon Battletome. Thank you so much for sending it over, Games Workshop. Mikey will be very happy with this, seeing as he collects them and has been going, ngang, 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 I'm going to eat and crush your bones quite a lot recently. But until then, as always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. I hope you have a fantastic day when you get up to. Remember to live and let's dice.